Hello and welcome back to Lightworker Training. My name is Tatiana, and today I'm going to get into the topic of spiritual bypassing. People are talking about it, so let's talk about it. All right, so maybe you've seen this thrown around. Maybe someone has accused you of spiritual bypassing. Maybe you've asked yourself, am I spiritually bypassing? Good question. Let's find out what this actually means and how to tell if you are, in fact, bypassing. So, bypassing, what does this mean? If you think about it, it just means you're taking, like, it could be one of those highways, right? Where you have this option of going this way, or you could take the bypass and go around, right? So it's sidestepping, going around. There could be a very good reason why you're bypassing or avoiding or sidestepping something, right? So in the physical sense, you could be walking down the street, walking down the sidewalk, and there's a big pile of dog poop in the middle of the sidewalk, and you bypass it by sidestepping and avoiding it. Anything wrong with that? No, it's fantastic, right? Sometimes you want to bypass things. So this term bypassing being thrown around in a very negative and accusatory way, let's just remember that there are positive aspects of sidestepping something. And we're going to talk about, you know, all of the things, right? So, but I just want to kind of give a basic definition here first. So that's a physical example. A physical example is, I don't want to go through here. I'm going to avoid it. I see there's a sketchy guy on the street up there. He's drunk. He might fuck with me. I'm going to cross the street. I'm going to avoid that potential confrontation, that potential danger. I'm seeing that. I'm seeing it clearly. I'm choosing to go this way. Yes, I am bypassing that. Okay? Makes sense, right? Okay, so then we have emotional bypassing, right? So this is where it starts to get funky, because when you look at this in a physical way, it makes perfect sense, but it could also make perfect sense emotionally, mentally, spiritually, right? And this is, but this is where it gets a little tougher, I think, for people to really understand what's going on, because it's not this dense thing in the world of form in front of you in physicality, right? It's something that's happening in this kind of mysterious inner world of the invisible realms. And we're not really taught how to work through our emotions and our thoughts and things like that in this world. Not very well, anyway. That's usually not what our education is about in this world. It is if we choose it, for sure. And that usually doesn't happen until we're older and we're like, why am I a basket case? I need to heal some shit. Okay, so emotional bypassing. You say you feel a really intense emotional energy come up within you, and perhaps you're in a situation where it's not really appropriate or the best thing to do to release that emotional energy or process that emotional energy at that moment. So you might choose to avoid that process in that moment. There's actually nothing wrong with that. Like, say you're in the middle of doing something like preparing dinner with a sharp knife or cutting something with a power tool, and something happens that triggers this really strong emotional response, and you want to just flip out, but you can't because you're going to cut your finger off or something like that, right? So you hold it back in that moment, you bypass or avoid the emotional processing that needs to happen. So you will probably still feel something, but it's like this survival mechanism kicks in and it shuts it down for that moment so that you can do what you need to do to keep your physical body safe, right? So, like the example I gave earlier of maybe you see a sketchy person on the street and you decide to go this way. Maybe that triggers some old trauma and you feel this emotional charge on it, but you can't process that trauma right now because you're not in a safe place to do it. So you choose to avoid processing it, repress it, and avoid the physical confrontation, avoid the emotional confrontation of dealing with your emotions as they're coming up. There's nothing wrong with that. There's everything right about that because it's not the place, it's not the time, and it does happen. So many times we can just take a time out, stop, process, but sometimes it's just not a conducive situation for processing whatever that emotional energy is. Now, should you just repress it and not process it for the rest of your life? Hell no, you need to deal with that. And probably like there's an additional layer on it now that you had to, stuff it away for a minute. You're going to have to unpack that, and it makes it a little trickier, but there's a wise part of yourself that recognized, yo, we can't deal with this right now, okay? So it knew that it would be better to have to deal with unpacking it later, even though there'd be another layer of crap, rather than have to deal with the trauma of encountering this negative situation or not being able to avoid it properly because you're, going through your overwhelm, freak out kind of energy, right? Okay, let's talk about mental bypassing. So, mental bypassing usually has a flavor of okay, so there's a couple of these things could all be interacting with each other in interesting ways. And so I'm going to just try to keep it really, really simple and give the most clear-cut descriptions I can. So if you think about it, there are times when you need to reflect and you need to think about things. And then there are times where thinking about things can get in the way. So either one of those could be mental bypassing. So either you're avoiding thinking through something because it's not the right time to think through something. Now, I'm giving you the conscious versions of this, right? Or it could be that you're overthinking to avoid doing something else. That's not the one I'm talking about right now, but that could be. So on the positive side, there is this, there's the same kind of thing. You don't want to get in this physical situation, or you can't process the emotions in that moment. It might be, I can't think about this right now. I can't mentally process this information right now. So if that's true, it's very wise to not think about something right now. It doesn't mean turn your brain off for the rest of your life, never think about anything, right? So, And then, oh, okay, I'm going to talk about spiritual bypassing last, because that's the big one everybody wants to know, right? So there are times where some of these things will be used as a means of bypassing one of the other things. So if you remember in my video of, oh shoot, it's been so long since I made that video, I can't remember which one it is, but I talked about, oh, okay, I know I talked about it in Act Like You Know, and it was about the importance of consciousness expressing through all three modes: mental, emotional, and physical. So you have to act on what you know. If you're not acting on it, you don't really know it, right? So all three of these things, we need to be able to engage: the physical, the emotional, and the mental. So if we are sidestepping something physically because we want to avoid feeling the emotions or thinking about something, right, then that's not a positive thing. Okay, so that would be physical bypassing to avoid something that actually we need to do. See the difference? So like one is, I'm avoiding this because this is a, you know, a bad situation that I don't need to get myself into, you know, confronting this drunk person on the street or whatever. Or, you know, it could be, but if, okay, let me get back to that example. But if I'm crossing the street because I don't want to have to deal with my feelings about walking by that park that I used to go to with my ex or something like that, or I'm avoiding walking by this park where I was assaulted or something. So there's some old trauma or some old heavy emotions, or I'm saying, well, I'm not going to put myself in that physical situation because it's going to force me to have to think, and I don't want to have to think, you know. Now that would be more of a negative expression of bypassing. So bypassing, like anything else, is a tool, right? So is it used for something positive or something negative? So this is for you to discern. This is really important. You can't just say bypassing is bad. Bypassing is just bypassing. It's not good or bad, but the energy underneath it will show you if this is something that's actually going to be helpful for your development and self-actualization, self-realization, or is this something that is going to retard that process? So we're here because we want to accelerate that process, right? So let's use bypassing in a wise way, not in a way of avoiding doing what we need to do. So there might be times where you're like, yeah, I can't deal with processing that right now, but eventually you're gonna have to walk by that park. You're gonna have to think about that stuff or process that trauma, correct? Okay, so emotional bypassing. This could be, I'm not gonna think about that right now, or I'm not gonna feel that right now because, you know, my life could be in danger if I process these emotions right now, or it's not a safe space, or if I process this right now, this person's gonna, you know, attack me psychically or verbally, and that's just going to add more onto the pile for me to process. So I'm not going to do it right now. I'm going to do it when I'm in a safe space. That makes sense. But if you're not dealing with your emotions because why would I ever want to feel that stuff? It's horrible. I'm never going to feel those dark emotions. I'm just going to, crack out on video games or hit my bong or whatever. That's not helpful. And I know you can feel the difference in this, right? And I'm going to break down a little bit more once I give these examples how we could tell the difference. But I'm just giving the examples because you can see in these illustrations, it's a very different underlying energy, right? So mentally, you might say, well, I can't think about that right now because blah, 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 blah. That makes sense sometimes. But to say, la, 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 I can't hear you. I'm never going to look at that. I'm never going to think about this aspect of reality, this part of myself. I'm never going to contemplate this. That's not helpful, right? So if you and so you could use a physical thing to bypass something emotional or mental. You could use emotional bypassing to avoid you know feeling to avoid doing something physical. So say you don't actually like how it feels to go out and hang out in bars and drink with your friends. But rather than deal with those feelings and honor those feelings, you do the physical thing anyway, even though you don't want, even though it doesn't feel good, you do it anyway because you have a mental belief that, you have to be socially accepted by these people. And the only way they'll accept you is if you go to the bar with them, blah, 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 blah. So it's like you're bypassing your own emotions by doing something mental and physical, right? Going to the bar and then justifying it in your mind. So I don't want to get too off on these examples, but I just want to show you that they can all play together, right? And so when I talk about spiritual bypassing, you could be using spiritual bypassing to do something positive, like avoid getting entangled in the bullshit of this world. You could use spiritual bypassing to help get through some emotional hardship or mental confusion of, well, I feel really confused, but I'm just going to trust that my higher self has this on lock and I don't have to worry about it. That could be helpful in that moment, right? Just to get you through like kind of a tough time, or just to avoid getting ensnared in some gnarly stuff in this world. So how can you tell if spiritual bypassing is positive or negative? So I just gave all these examples of positive examples and negative examples, right? So let's look at spiritual bypassing. Have you ever heard anybody say that spiritual bypassing could be a good thing? Have you ever heard anybody say bypassing could be a good thing? It's just a tool. I really want you to understand this about light work and dark work and positive and negative aspects of things. Bypassing could be a tool in our light work kit. Are we using it to create more positivity for ourselves in the world, or are we using it to create more bullshit? Let's break it down. So like I said in some of the principles I talked about, I can't remember any of the names of the videos right now. I talked about these two essential natures of, actually, I think it's light work versus dark work. So check out light work versus dark work if you want a review on this. But it's the same thing. So either we are aligned with the energy of love or we're not. And when we're not in that state, we tend to collapse into fear. So a lot of times I'll put this in perspective of love versus fear, or love versus separation, unity consciousness versus separation, things like that. So how do you know if you're spiritually bypassing in a positive way? Because it's going to be aligned with love. It's going to be aligned with light, right? How do you know that you're spiritually bypassing in a negative way? Because it's going to be aligned with fear. So let me give you some examples of this so that it becomes really clear. When you are choosing to sidestep something, avoid something because of a spiritual perspective, and it's coming from a place of love, it's going to feel like an embodiment of courage. It's not because you're afraid to face the thing. This is the difference, right? It's not because you're afraid, it's because your spiritual wisdom is informing you. Go this way. Don't go into that. Don't go into that mess. Not because you're afraid to go into that mess, but because that is not for your highest, and it's not for the highest and best of you. It's not for the highest and best of this person or whatever. What, ultimately, when you're aligned with what is correct, it will be a win-win for everyone. Whether they accept that or not is another story, but you can accept it and you can act on it. And that's all you need to worry about, is taking care of your primary responsibility, because you can't do anyone else's work for them. You can only do your own work. So when you are coming from a place of love, it actually is doing the work to sidestep some of the snares, some of the traps, some of the entanglements of the parasitic system, which feeds off of fear. Okay? So when you do that, it will feel courageous. It will feel like you are aware of the danger over there. So you're sidestepping it, right? It will feel like you're in your power and you have clarity. You have clarity of what is really going on, who you are, and what your choices are. And you are making a conscious choice to avoid that pitfall. That's what I'm all about. I'm giving you these videos and these things that I've picked up, that I've discovered or picked up from other folks. It's all just there for us to discover one way or the other, so that you can avoid and sidestep some of these pitfalls. So in a sense, all of these videos are about spiritual bypassing. Okay, so what does it look like or feel like when we are bypassing in the negative way, in alignment with fear and not the truth of us, but the lie of separation? What does that look like? Well, it looks like collapsing and hiding. Not, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, no, 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 la, 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 can't hear you. Hiding from the truth, hiding from having to deal with a confrontation, not because it's the wise thing to do, but because there's a belief that you don't have what it takes, because you're afraid. It's avoiding through ignorance, rather than having awareness of what's going on and seeing it clearly and saying, maybe not so much. I think I'm going to go over here. It's going, oh no, and then just kind of stumbling along and hoping that maybe if you just ignore it, it'll go away. Good luck with that. It also is this feeling of, powerlessness. Rather than being in your power and making informed choices, it feels more like a reaction from a place of victimhood, a place of disconnect, a place of, just being out there on your own and being afraid and being confused and not being grounded, maybe being a little checked out. Yeah, I like to poke at the weed smokers in these videos. But I do feel like these kinds of avoidances are problematic. So, don't take it personally. Just know that if you're having your drinkies or smoking your weed, it's gonna make it that much harder. It's up to you, it's like if you want to walk up that river with a boulder on your back against the current, God bless you. In a weed fog and haze, you do you. All right, so but it feels like that kind of, disconnection, kind of shutdown, confusion, victimhood, disempowerment, overwhelm, like, oh, I just can't handle it. That is not who you are. So when you feel that energy of, oh, I can't deal, who does that belong to? Who does that belong to? Return to sender. Return to sender, whatever that is. Whoever energy that is, send it back. You might have accidentally plugged yourself back into the matrix, and you need to unplug and come back to this field, this one. This one is one with the one, and we are getting it all done. We don't have to resonate with the lowest common denominator of base level consciousness in the collective hive mind. We can become self-actualized, self-realized, and really just be in our power. What do we have power over? It's power over this. It's power with this. It's working together with this body, this energy field, this system connected to the source of all life. So that's your power. You're never going to get it over here somewhere. It's all here. It's all an inside job. Yeah, that's what it is. It is though, right? So when you have that feeling of hiding, ignorance, avoiding from a place of disempowerment, victimhood, confusion, overwhelm, recognize you got off track. This is your notice to pay attention, to stop, reel it back in, get back to the truth of you, because the truth of you will bypass bullshit out there in the world from a place of love and wisdom. From a place of wisdom, you say, I think I'm going to bypass putting my hand on that hot stove. I think I'm going to avoid that. Is there anything wrong with that? Is that maybe a good idea? So I think that's about all I have to say about this. It is really just so clear and simple. It just keeps coming back to these basic principles. Is it coming from a place of love or not? If it's not coming from a place of love, then, you can always choose again. You can choose to come back to the truth of yourself as love. So, yep, that's all I got on that for today. I hope this has been fun and enlightening. Again, my name is Tatiana, and I'm so grateful to have you joining me today. If you ever find anything I'm sharing useful, please share it with your friends and loved ones or anyone who might want to get some of this encouragement or information. And I will see you next time on Lightworker Training. Bye for now.